But Darrell really is just a world-class scholar, if you don't know about Darrell. He's, I told Johnny before, by the way, he was up here doing Acts before I got off the stage, I said, you know Darrell Bock is like the Luke scholar in Acts, so he was happy that you gave him some props. I will mention, though, the book Cultural Intelligence is for sale downstairs. It's a great and very accessible book, so if you want to hear more about what Darrell is talking about and he doesn't cover, pick it up. And, of course, if you want to pick up his Luke commentaries, they're excellent. So, a couple questions for you.
Okay.
I want to start here, and we were talking about this before you came out here and shared about where you just came from, which is really intriguing to me. So you were at the Sundance Film Festival.
That's right.
What was that like? And how does that relate to what you were just talking about? Because people were like, huh? What's going on? How does that work?
Yeah, I was there with a group called Windrider. Windrider is a group of Christian filmmakers who have come alongside the Sundance Film Festival to inject a spiritual presence in the conversations that take place there, and the filming and the topics that take place there. Shorthand. What Windrider will say is that films, serious films that deal with lifestyles. I told my brother, my sister-in-law used to do PR for the Sundance Film Festival, his wife. So I told him, I sent a picture of Park City, Utah covered in snow, and said, I'm at the Sundance Film Festival. He says, what are you doing there? Older brother, okay? Got to impress your older brother. All right? What are you doing there? I said, I'm here teaching a class with 7 of our seminary students and another faculty member. And I guess the way to describe it is we're dealing with film and life's topics. Because serious film is where you hear what the world is wrestling with. In all its forms, in all the difficult spaces, in all the messiness that is life. And Windrider comes alongside and says, there's a spiritual thing that's sometimes going on. So one of the films done by not by a Christian, was about the chaplaincy. A year's study of chaplain interns at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, in which people are dealing with life and death issues all the time. And God shows up. So the Windrider people interviewing this director said, what do you do with that? He said, you're not a believer. What do you do with that? You know what his answer was? I'm still trying to process that. So we want our students to have an ear to what's going on in the world around them. I don't think you can lead in the church or lead organizations in your workplace unless you understand what's going on in the world around you. And you understand how the reason people are so distracted in their lives is because they are wrestling with having no location in their lives. And developing that empathy.
So you talked a little bit in your talk about identity and how that's such a key starting place, that it's very much about a spiritual thing. How do we leverage that? How do we listen well about the identity conversation?
I think that what you're going to find is people will be fuzzy about their identity, or they will have chosen.
Paul's talking about this tonight too, so
that's
we might
exactly
be
right.
treading on his.
Well, that's okay.
Okay.
You know.
sorry, Paul.
Can't talk about identity too much. It's kind of at the core of everything that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so, and all the fighting for territory that we see in the world is the fighting between competing identities. So we have to wrestle with how that works and why it is. Here's a question to ponder. I like asking questions that cause you to ponder, and if you get less sleep, blame me. How is it possible that in a church that theologically shares the same fundamental orthodox theological faith, I'm talking about the black church and the white church in the United States, can be seeing the race space so differently? How does that happen? And what's going on? Lenses. Because every conversation, I'm going to say this tomorrow, but I'll go ahead and preview it now. Every conversation, there's the topic that you're discussing. There are the lenses that you're looking at it through. And there's the way in which your identity is impacted by what you're discussing. And most people get locked up at the top layer, that's just the frosting, gang. What's really going on is much deeper. I'm going to save some time and illustrate it. I am gifted, at least I think I'm gifted, with the ability to multitask. Which means I can be in front of a computer and my wife can walk in and talk to me, okay? And as she is talking to me, I am processing what she's hearing while looking at the screen. And she will say to me, wives, you know what she's going to say. You're not listening to me. Okay? And now it is the hour of decision for me. Because what I could do, and I've done this, I can repeat back to her almost word for word what she said to me as proof, absolute proof, that I was listening to her. Do you think she's satisfied with that answer? Because it's not listening that she's talking about, it's caring. She is saying to me, what's on that screen is more important than my getting your deserved undivided attention. And she's dead right. That's our conversation.
Well, I know. And I'm glad I'm not the only one that experiences that too. So, my wife isn't here right now.
Yeah, we're moving on.
I know.
Yeah, as fast as we can.
All right. Well, actually, so another one I want to ask you, and this might be a bit of a long-winded question, but you were the one you brought up the Fox CNN thing, and I think in terms of my question is about disagreement. So let me know if you're going to answer this later on. But we've done an underground about this. We kind of weave in the idea about listening. We try as much as we can in preaching, but how do we disagree well? And at least part of the Fox CNN issue is that those entities are driven by money and clicks, and they're trying to reinforce echo chambers to some extent. There's really no unbiased source of news. But what I find in like people that they're having but there is things that we can disagree about. People have trouble having dispassionate discussions. Like Paul's up here talking about philosophers, they get together and they debate and they're not offended even if they say mean things, right? But nowadays, if you get into debate somewhere, all of a sudden you're unfriended on Facebook or whatever. How do you have disagreements well and use your speech well as part of that?
By understanding what's really going on. Okay, so let me take a shot at this. Almost everything that we discuss in the world is part of a dysfunctional world. It means the things that ought to be aligned are not aligned. And you know what happens in most of our debates? One side has picked a certain set of values that they honor, and the other side has prioritized a different set of values. Okay? And they're colliding. Okay? Now, what our public discourse does is to say, pick your values and minimize the values coming from the other side. Okay? So, someone's coming at me and there's no merit in anything that they can say to me because of who they are. Okay? And they can be anybody here, gang, so just hang with me. All right? We never have the discussion we need to have. Which is, what is it about your set of concerns that I ought to be paying attention to you that I've not been paying attention to you about? And what is it that you can pay attention to that I'm raising that you haven't been paying attention to? We never calibrate the collision of values. We only choose. We turn it into a binary. It's all this or all that. And we embrace one and dump everything else about the other. And you know what you do when you do that? You've actually removed the basis for a conversation.
It's good. So you brought up at some point here the idea of the power of God. Okay. Now you're the Greek scholar. You give us a little lesson about dunamis and the power and how that plays into some of the things you're talking about. Because that's something we kind of put off to the side, I think.
Great question.
Yeah,
I'm glad you asked it because I didn't define
Everybody's telling me I ask great questions.
I know.
So.
I didn't. Yeah. Well, keep asking the questions, okay? We won't talk about the answers.
All
anyway,
right.
Okay, so what we mean by power in the case of Romans is simply the word enablement. The capability to do something that previously you were unable to do. God has given you that capability. That's part of our hope. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. And guess what the first good work is about why God saved us? It isn't about getting to heaven. It's about something that's going to happen in the future. It's about the fact that we've been made in the church one new man, where Jew and Gentile, two very estranged people, that's a racial discussion, two very estranged people who now are being asked to live together and form a community together. And the entire rest of the New Testament, from Matthew through Revelation, is about the work that it takes to make that work. And the enablement that God gives that makes that able to work. And somehow we have managed to separate something that belongs together, which is how my individual salvation and how my own personal redemption is designed to touch the lives of those around me.
We're saved not just for the sake of being saved, but to do something about it.
Exactly right.
If I summarize,
what happened in the fundamentalist modernist controversy is those two things got pulled apart, and each side, I'm illustrating your earlier question. Okay, so liberals came along and said, we like the ethics of Jesus, but we don't like the theology that's underneath it. Okay, and they divided what was united. Conservatives came along and said, you know what? We like that deal, only we're going to flip it. We like the theology of what's going on, but don't ask us to think about the hard questions about how the world's supposed to function with us in it. And then my line is, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder.
All right, so I got one more question. Well, It might be two questions in one, but it might take you a long time to answer. So the whole idea of doing good, which I think is what you're getting at, what does that tangibly look like? And kind of a subset question is, what is the church's role in the world? You were talking about the spiritual aspect. Is there anything that goes into advocating policies and structures and all that? What does that look like?
You advocate for your policies. You try to explain them in terms that, because you know what the other person's values are and where they're coming. Try and explain them in terms that they might hopefully connect to. Like, family stability is probably a good thing. Okay, that's not a difficult concept.
Yeah. You're looking at me like I don't agree.
No, sorry. Yeah, I've got my European look in my eye, okay? All right, so, no, you try and do it that way. You make your case, you advocate, okay? But here's the key. Here's what the church needs to learn. Church needs to learn how to be a good loser. Because we've been told...
What does that mean?
Well, we've been told how the world will react, okay? The world is not going to always be accepting of what seem to be... Remember those passages in Peter? You're going to be slandered for doing the right thing, for doing good, for saying the right thing. You're going to get pushback. You're going to advocate in the public square. You're going to do the best that you can. But when you lose well because... Well, and then I'm back to where I ended, which is... In the end, everyone is accountable for the choices they make. You know how gracious God is? Just think about this. God is so gracious that he allows us to rebel, and he also says, and you're going to be responsible for your choices. And I can love people well enough to say that's a bad choice, or that's not healthy, or that's problematic, or that messes things up. I can do all those things.